I talked about raw beers. Over here we have an example of a house strain of yeast going on. I have two strains that are neutral fermenters. I want some genetic diversity. I want them to have little yeasty sex over here. And I want them to be able to show what the microbiome and the mutation process is doing. This building dates to the 1890s. It is mostly wood, and what isn't wood is lath and plaster covered in horsehair. I'm sorry, lath and plaster, the plaster has horsehair in it. So it's an absorbent thing that probably has a culture in there already. If this goes well, I have contributions coming in from the environment slowly over time. If it doesn't, I got to dump it, and well, hey, better to have this experiment done than not. In the past, we have fostered a house strain of yeast forward for about 5 years plus. It started out as an English strain of yeast, but by the time we were done with it through our cropping techniques, our pitching techniques, our preservation techniques, it turned into essentially a Belgian strain of yeast. It was very phenolic, very high attenuating, not much else, so it lacked a little character, but this is something we want to do to bring some authentic flavor to beer. Style points again. We don't filter the yeast out of our beer. Yeast is part of how your beer should taste. It brings relevant nutrition that our ancestors would have cared about. It is naturally fined, but it is not mechanically fined. So if you look at how beer emerged, our ancestors were often in a position where it was, do I eat or do I drink? And often you wanted to do the same thing. If you're growing grain, you can make bread, which is pretty important. Bread gives you meaningful nutrition. It gives you a meaningful amount of protein, oddly enough, a vegetarian source of protein, because if you kill deer, you might get killed yourself, so that's nice to not have to risk that. But then you go over here to beer, and what do? You get a safer form of hydration. You can move around a lot, and you can figure out where the clean sources of water are. You get a meaningful amount of carbohydrates. You get some protein. You get your B12 vitamins. You get digestible silica, which is good for your bones. You get the precursors for collagen, which are good for your bones. So this, I hope I'm being very coherent here, but this technology as it emerged was relevant to our ancestors because it addressed a lot of critical needs. You weren't getting work done without beer, and it's been that way for hundreds of years. Beer is something that really enabled our ancestors to talk about settling down, civilizing, generating art, generating all these other things that we now value. And what's also cool about this process is our ancestors were domesticating things they didn't know existed per se. Layman comes along like 1750s and he says, hey, it's this microbe. But before that, our ancestors were producing the beer styles we ate without quite understanding it was a microbe. At some point, things evolved to the point where a brewer and a baker would share a substance called barm. It was a liquid yeast. Did they know that yeast was in there? No, but they knew it made good bread and it made good beer. And throughout that process of exchanging yeasts and building breweries, they figured out these subtle methods to domesticate microbes. So hopefully that was nice and coherent.